The phone rang at 2:17 a.m., jolting Marcus awake. His apartment was dark, quiet, too quiet for someone used to the hum of city life. He rubbed his eyes and squinted at the glowing screen. "Marcus, it's me, Sarah," said a voice, hushed and urgent. "Something's happening in East Hollow. A resident reported something. We need you here now." Marcus sat up, adrenaline already pushing him into focus. East Hollow wasn't far, but the thought of being called in the middle of the night to check what might have been a prank made his stomach churn. Still, he worked for the DISA Department of Environmental Studies from Anomalies. And this was exactly the kind of call you couldn't ignore. By the time he arrived at the site, the sun hadn't risen. His team, Sarah, Luis, and Anita, were already there, standing on the edge of a nondescript patch of forest that yesterday had been completely ordinary. "Look at this," Sarah said, gesturing at the clearing. Marcus frowned. It looked normal, just a small grove surrounded by maple trees, mossy ground. But something was off. The colors seemed sharper, the shadows too dark, and the air heavier, like it was pushing against them. Luis, ever the skeptic, muttered, "It's just early morning light. Fog, maybe." But Marcus could feel it in his chest. Something wasn't right. They started their survey, measuring soil, recording environmental data, noting nothing abnormal, until Sarah pointed toward the base of an ancient oak. "There's a fissure," she said. "Looks natural, but it wasn't here yesterday." They approached, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The fissure widened as they got closer. At first it looked like a shallow cave, just a crack in the earth, but as Marcus leaned in, he felt a vertigo-like pull, like the world itself was tilting. "Guys, this isn't just a fissure," he whispered. Anita scoffed nervously. "Don't start with your horror stories at 3 a.m., Marcus." But when she peered into the opening, her face went pale. It's like the inside doesn't match the outside," she said. "Like physics isn't working." Marcus felt it too. The air inside the fissure hummed faintly, like static electricity, yet the sound wasn't coming from anywhere. The shadows shifted unnaturally. The walls, if you could call them walls, seemed deeper, farther than the opening should allow. Luis muttered, "Maybe it's a hallucination?" And for a moment, Marcus wanted to believe that too. The edges of the fissure seemed to ripple when he blinked, almost as if reality was vibrating. They set up equipment, cameras, measuring devices, EMF detectors. Marcus crawled into the fissure first, heart pounding, flashlight cutting a pale circle through the darkness. The walls felt wrong, soft and rigid at the same time, and the space widened inexplicably as he moved. "Guys, it's bigger than the opening, much bigger," he called back. The team followed. Then they reached what appeared to be the heart of the cave, and that's when reality fractured. The walls shimmered, shadows elongated and twisted. Marcus looked down at the ground and saw reflections, but none of them matched the team. Each reflection moved slightly differently, arguing, gesturing, laughing, sometimes even silently screaming. "Do you see this?" Anita whispered, voice trembling. "It's like another dimension," Sarah said slowly. "But it can't be. That's impossible." Luis gripped the edge of the fissure, eyes wide. "I'm seeing things that aren't real. We're hallucinating. Must be." And yet, every time they blinked or looked away, the anomalies persisted. The cave, or whatever it was, responded to them. The walls stretched when they moved, the shadows mimicked their fears, and whispers curled into their ears, sometimes friendly, sometimes mocking. Marcus realized something terrifying. The cave wasn't just a physical place, it was a reality shifter, something that altered perception while bending physics, memory, and sense itself. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't feel linear. The team argued, laughed nervously, and sometimes shouted at their reflections or the whispering shadows. At one point, Sarah froze, staring at a corner of the cave. "Hold on, if he was there and you were here, then who?" she murmured. The question hung in the air. Marcus felt a cold dread. He realized the shadows weren't always shadows. They were other versions of them. Moments that had happened, might happen, or perhaps had never happened at all, playing out simultaneously. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Look," Sarah said, pointing. In the flickering light, he could see two figures, identical to Luis, one slightly older, one slightly younger, arguing about a measurement that hadn't even existed yet. Marcus swallowed. We're not alone," he whispered. And then it hit him. They weren't just observing. They were being observed and manipulated. The deeper they went, the more unstable reality became. Their instruments failed. Phones cracked screens and displayed numbers that didn't exist. Compass needles spun, madly. Shadows formed shapes that seemed almost sentient. Yet at the center of it all, a strange calm settled over Marcus. For all its horror, the cave, or dimension, was obeying rules, just ones he couldn't understand. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't alive in the human sense. But it responded, bending perception to test them. And then, just as abruptly as it had started, the anomalies stopped. The cave returned to a normal fissure. The shadows aligned with the walls. The floor stopped pulsing. The air felt ordinary again. They blinked. The sun was rising outside. The forest was quiet. Nothing was different except that they all felt changed. Marcus looked at the fissure. The camera footage had recorded nothing. The EMF devices were off, but the fissure itself had a faint shimmer, barely visible, like it was breathing, waiting. Sarah turned to him. "Do you think we imagined it?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, not imagined. It was real, just not real. Not the way we understand reality." Louise swallowed. "So, it's still there?" Marcus looked at the fissure. "I think, yes. But I also think it doesn't care if we go back. It only cares that we know it exists." Anita laughed nervously. "Well, that was fun. Anyone else want coffee?" They left the forest, silent, watching each other carefully. Everyone knew something had changed, even if they couldn't explain it. Reality had shifted, bent, and teased them. But the fissure remained ordinary to anyone else who might stumble across it. And somewhere beneath the earth, deep enough to escape notice, the cave, or whatever it was, waited. After a week, they were called again. By the time Marcus and his team arrived at the site, the forest no longer looked like an ordinary grove. Tall fences topped with razor wire circled the area. Guard towers loomed at each corner, and vehicles with government insignias rumbled along a freshly paved road that had been cut through the trees. Concrete barriers funneled them toward a checkpoint. Men and women in black tactical gear waved them through, scanning IDs and murmuring curt instructions. A metallic, humming tent had been erected over the fissure itself, reinforced with sensors, lights, and cameras. It looked more like a research facility than a natural cave. Marcus's stomach tightened. This wasn't just science anymore, this was containment. Inside the tent, the atmosphere smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt circuits. Marcus saw several technicians monitoring dozens of screens, tracking strange patterns and anomalies in the fissure. Some images made his skin crawl. Shadows moved where there were no sources of light. The walls shimmered unnaturally, and every frame seemed slightly off. A man in a dark lab coat approached the team. Marcus recognized him from the initial incident, Dr. Reed, the head of the government operation. "Good to see you again," Reed said, his voice clipped, professional. "You four were the first outsiders to make sense of what's happening here. That's why you're back. This isn't a standard assignment anymore. We're running full analysis, but we need your experience, your intuition." Marcus swallowed. "We're not in charge here." Reed's eyes flicked toward the fissure. "No, you're not, but you know what it does. You understand the unmeasurable, and we don't." Sarah, arms crossed, muttered, "So we're the guinea pigs again, basically?" Reed gave a tight smile. "You could call it that." The team was escorted into the containment lab surrounding the fissure. Sensors lined the walls, recording every vibration, every electromagnetic anomaly, even what looked like minute temporal fluctuations. A security team stood ready, weapons holstered but alert, while a series of large screens displayed real-time footage of the fissure, except the fissure on the monitors seemed deeper than it actually was.